Oftentimes, when a breakdown occurs in a conflict conversation, it's due to one of two things and possibly both. The first is that the people involved do not believe that the other person is actually listening. Introduction. How many times have you decided to start working out more, begin eating healthier, or finally quit smoking? You succeed for a few days, weeks, maybe even months, but then the craving for your old habit becomes so strong that you give in and revert to your previous ways. It happens all the time. We want to make changes but find it difficult to sustain them long term. If this sounds familiar, you already understand the powerful impact habits have on your life. In The Power of Habit, you'll discover how to break bad habits and form new, positive ones. By exploring how the human brain influences our daily decisions, you'll learn how habits control our actions and shape our society. Soon, you'll have the knowledge to overcome the power of habit and adopt new ones that can lead to a transformative, positive lifestyle. Chapter 1. The Habit Loop. Think about your morning routine. How do you begin your day? Perhaps you drag yourself out of bed at some ungodly hour, trudge to the kitchen, grab the coffee pot, and start filling it with water. Do you ever stop to ask yourself, what do I do next? No, of course not. That's because your brain has formed a habit that allows you to act like a robot and get things done. So you immediately pour the water into the coffee maker, place the pot, pour the coffee grounds into the filter, and hit the on button. More sophisticated coffee makers might run on a timer nowadays, but regardless of your routine, whether it's making your morning smoothie or grabbing a protein shake to head to the gym, you never have to stop and think about your next step. While that coffee is what gets many of us out of bed in the morning, how does our brain allow us to make that coffee without even thinking? Some of us are probably still half asleep. The answer lies in the basal ganglia, a structure in the primal region of our brain near the spinal cord. To understand how this area helps us form habits, let's consider a study conducted by MIT researchers who examined the activity of mice. Placed inside a T-shaped maze, the mice had to find their way to a piece of chocolate at the end. Researchers tracked the brain activity of the mice as they navigated the maze. Eventually, the mice learned to reach the chocolate by turning left upon entering the maze. As they learned this, their brain activity decreased. This process of turning a sequence of actions into an automatic routine is known as chunking and has an evolutionary role that allows our brain to save energy and perform everyday tasks more efficiently. Every habit can be broken down into 3 parts known as the habit loop. A habit begins with a cue or a signal that triggers the habit. For instance, your alarm clock ringing triggers your brain to determine the next steps. Then comes the routine, which is the set of actions you take. This is when making coffee on autopilot happens. Your routine becomes getting out of bed and walking to the kitchen to set up your coffee pot. Finally, you get the reward, which is sipping that hot cup of delicious coffee that helps you wake up and continue your day. Once you enjoy the reward, your brain activity increases again and reinforces the link between the cue and the routine. Habits are the choices that all of us deliberately make at some point, and then stop thinking about but continue doing, often every day. So when you think about it, how many of your daily decisions are based on habit? If you remember, habits are automatic, so a better question might be, how many decisions do you make? Without even thinking about it, you'll soon realize that no less than 40% of choices are actually habits. Now it's time to learn how to harness the profound power of habit. Chapter 2. The Golden Rule of Habit Change. Morning and afternoon routines become essential parts of our daily lives as we navigate through our grind. For instance, you might have a specific coffee shop you visit every morning for your caffeine fix. Maybe you have a routine of stopping by the gym every day after work. These routines eventually become habits, and while they can be harmless and even healthy, it demonstrates how easily unhealthy habits can take root. Perhaps, instead of stopping by that morning coffee shop, you find yourself at McDonald's ordering a sugary sweet tea and a sausage and egg biscuit instead of coffee. Once you realize that your morning McDonald's habit might be contributing to weight gain, you'll see how difficult it becomes to drive past your usual spot without stopping. You might tell yourself it's just this last time, or end up feeling grumpy for the rest of the day if you don't stop. Breaking a bad habit is challenging because of the craving you develop for the reward at the end of the habit loop. Each morning, you crave that rush of sugar from the sweet tea and the satisfying taste of the sausage biscuit. To conquer bad habits, you must adapt the habit loop. Consider Ray, the owner of Sea on the Range, a surf and turf restaurant. What was once a successful business is now struggling because of Ray's and his employees' habits. Working close to 80 hours a week, Ray has developed a drinking habit where he indulges in a double whiskey at the end of a long day to unwind. Although he is not an alcoholic, he finds himself craving his drink earlier in the day, sometimes even having a cold beer before the day ends. His drinking habit has started to affect his patience and his profits. When Ray drinks, he becomes less patient with his employees, who then ignore customers looking for drink refills. His short temper has led to shouting at employees in front of customers and has contributed to high turnover. It's clear that Ray needs to change his habits to turn his business around. An essential part of changing a habit is identifying each element of the habit loop. For Ray, the cue was the end of a stressful day, the craving was the burn of the whiskey, the routine was sipping his double whiskey, and the reward was the relaxation he felt after drinking. This leads to what I call the golden rule of habit change. Don't change the cue or reward, change the routine, which also changes the craving. A small change in the habit loop can have a profound impact. So how can Ray change his routine to break his drinking habit? Fortunately, Ray owns a $25,000 pool in his backyard. Instead of craving the burn of the whiskey, he can start craving the smell of chlorine and the sensation of the water washing away the stress of the day. By replacing whiskey with swimming laps in the pool, Ray can shift his habit from drinking to swimming after work. This is why programs like Alcoholics Anonymous are successful. Instead of relieving stress at the bar, participants find relief through meetings and support from others in the program. However, simply replacing a routine might not be enough. I advise focusing on nurturing the new craving, as dwelling on the cravings that drive our routines makes it easier to maintain new habits. Chapter 3. Adopting Keystone Habits. Change can be intimidating and is often met with skepticism, especially from those who fear it the most. In a major company, implementing new policies and shifting the company's direction can be particularly daunting. New CEOs often face resistance as people question their vision. Paul O'Neill encountered this resistance when he took over Alcoa, an aluminum company in 1987 that had seen better days. Imagine the reaction O'Neill received when he announced that his focus would shift from profit and revenue to workplace safety. Investors questioned his credibility, with one even calling a client to say, "The board put a crazy hippie in charge and he's going to kill the company." Stakeholders and shareholders were not on board with his approach, but O'Neill understood the importance of changing the company's habits and was determined to do so. He also recognized that some habits are more crucial than others, and these are what I refer to as keystone habits. Keystone habits suggest that we don't need to overhaul everything. Instead, focusing on one or two priorities can lead to success. These priorities act as small wins that create a ripple effect, leading to additional positive changes. By concentrating on one or two keystone habits, we can trigger a domino effect of improvement. O'Neill chose to prioritize worker safety, which prompted managers and employees to consider how to make the manufacturing process safer and how to communicate these safety measures. This approach ultimately led to a more productive and profitable organization. By focusing on a single keystone habit, O'Neill demonstrated how disrupting habits in one area can promote positive change throughout the company. So how did O'Neill's changes impact the company? Would we be discussing it if it hadn't been successful? Of course not. Despite the initial doubts, O'Neill's approach proved to be a huge success. By the time of his retirement in 2000, Alcoa's annual net income had increased fivefold since O'Neill took charge. Keystone habits can also be applied on an individual level, not just within large corporations. For example, Michael Phelps, the Olympic gold medalist swimmer, adopted visualization and calming techniques as his keystone habits. He believes that his ability to visualize success and calm his nerves set him apart from others. Additionally, research indicates that focusing on keystone habits can be crucial for individuals trying to lose weight. Adopting a single habit, such as keeping a food journal, can lead to small wins that create a domino effect, resulting in significant positive lifestyle changes. Chapter 4. The Significance of Willpower. Replacing bad habits with good ones sounds straightforward in theory. You might think, replace whiskey with a swim. Swap a cigarette for a piece of gum. Trade a weekend TV binge for an outdoor hike. It all seems easy, but if you've ever tried to quit smoking or lose weight, you know how challenging it can be to adopt these new habits. This is because willpower plays a crucial role in building important habits. No other keystone habit is more significant than willpower. In the 1960s, Stanford conducted a famous study involving a large number of 4-year-olds. Each child was brought into a room with a table holding a tempting marshmallow. The researchers gave each child a choice. Eat the marshmallow now or wait a few minutes and receive 2 marshmallows. The researcher then left the room for 15 minutes. It turns out that only about 30% of the children managed to resist the urge to eat that delicious marshmallow. The most significant part of the study emerged years later when researchers tracked down the participants who were now adults. Those who had exhibited willpower and waited the full 15 minutes tended to have the best grades in school, were more popular on average, and were less likely to develop bad habits like drug addiction. Additional studies have reinforced these findings. For instance, a 2005 study of 8th graders revealed that those with higher levels of willpower had better grades and were more likely to gain admission to selective schools. But willpower isn't something we are born with. It is an ability that can be developed. With time and practice, we can strengthen our will. Researchers from Case Western Reserve University conducted a study where participants were asked to refrain from eating a cookie while others were allowed to eat it. Those who refrained later struggled to focus on completing a puzzle, indicating that their willpower had been depleted. However, just like any skill, willpower improves with practice. For example, Starbucks found that many employees had the willpower to remain cheerful and kind to customers. However, in stressful situations, such as when a customer yelled or complained, their willpower would drain, and they would lose their ability to stay positive. After some research, Starbucks executives discovered that employees were more likely to maintain their composure if they were mentally prepared for handling difficult customers and stressful situations. To support their employees, they developed the LAT method, which outlines steps to take during stressful interactions. Listen to the customer, acknowledge the complaint, take action, thank the customer, and explain why the situation occurred. By practicing this method, Starbucks baristas learned how to handle stress more effectively and maintain their willpower. You can adapt the LAT method to your own life as well. While it might not be applicable in exactly the same way, it can serve as a guide for creating your own strategies. For instance, I discuss how hip replacement patients who had to perform painful exercises for recovery were more successful if they wrote down their plans for overcoming obstacles. Although they didn't use the LAT method specifically, they set a plan and mentally prepared for challenging scenarios. Chapter 5. The Significance of Belief. Why is it often harder to form a new habit on your own? Going to the gym after work might be much more challenging by yourself, but it becomes easier with a gym buddy. Similarly, implementing new policies in a workplace becomes smoother when everyone supports the change. When faced with opposition or someone holding you back, adopting a new habit becomes significantly harder. This difficulty can be attributed to another crucial ingredient necessary for forming new habits: belief. In a previous chapter, we discussed Alcoholics Anonymous. While replacing the habit of going to the bar with attending group meetings was beneficial, many participants needed more than just a new habit to see real change. Alcoholics Anonymous incorporates belief in a higher power, which helps participants feel supported by something greater than themselves in their journey toward success. Belief is vital, but the group setting in Alcoholics Anonymous also plays a significant role in its effectiveness. People are more likely to believe in groups. For example, consider Rosa Parks, who sparked a civil rights movement in 1955 when she refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white man in Montgomery, Alabama. Although Parks was not the first to refuse, her action led to a year-long boycott and widespread outrage. One reason Rosa Parks had such an impact was her strong social network. She was well known in her community, actively involved in local organizations, and had many friends who supported her. Her extensive community ties created a network of support that was crucial. When she refused to give up her seat, her network of friends and acquaintances influenced others through peer pressure. Belief in a cause alone is not enough. There must be people who actively support that cause. When her support network joined the cause, opting out became more difficult. As the movement gained momentum, Martin Luther King Jr. further galvanized it with his advocacy for nonviolent protests and his call for forgiveness towards oppressors. This approach led to the formation of new habits as people organized church meetings and peaceful protests. Most importantly, the group's collective belief in the possibility of change was crucial. Willpower alone isn't sufficient to spark change. Belief in the potential for change is equally essential. Chapter 6. Habits become your responsibility. Once we recognize the need to change our habits, it becomes our responsibility to take the necessary steps to do so. To illustrate this point, I present two cases in which individuals were taken to court over mistakes that escalated due to their habits. The first case involves Brian Thomas, who in 2008 strangled his wife to death during an episode of sleep terrors. Distraught after realizing his actions, Thomas immediately reported himself to the police and awaited trial. During the trial, researchers demonstrated that those who experience sleep terrors might act upon their impulses while their brain activity is shut down, leaving only primitive neurological regions active. During Thomas' sleep terror, he was in a state where he believed he was defending his wife from an intruder. His defense argued that his response was automatic, triggered by his belief that he was protecting her. In other words, Thomas was acting on a habit. The second case I discuss involves Angie Bachman, who was sued by Harrah's Casino for $500,000 for failing to pay her gambling debts. Bachman had already lost her house and $1 million inheritance due to her gambling problem. Despite her known gambling issues and bankruptcy, Harrah's continued to send her offers for free trips to the casino. These offers exacerbated her gambling addiction and made her feel good, leading her to act on this habit as her defense in court. How did these trials end? Thomas was acquitted, and many, including the judge, expressed sympathy for him. In contrast, Bachman lost her case and faced significant public scorn. The difference lies in the nature of their situations. Thomas's actions were the result of a tragic accident that occurred while he was asleep, and he had no control over them. Bachman, on the other hand, recognized her gambling problem and had the free will to change her behavior. She had already declared bankruptcy and squandered a substantial inheritance. She could have opted out of Harrah's offers or taken steps to avoid them. In contrast, Thomas had no control over his actions during the sleep terror. Ultimately, changing habits is solely up to the individual. Chapter 7. Final summary. We all adopt habits throughout our lives, both good and bad. Our routines become unconscious habits that follow the same three-step loop. Cue, routine, reward. As we continue to crave the desired reward, breaking a bad habit becomes increasingly difficult. However, the key to changing your habits is to modify your routine while keeping the cue and reward the same. Although it's not as simple as just adopting a new routine, developing keystone habits is crucial for success. Keystone habits, such as willpower, can be practiced as you resist the urge to engage in bad habits. By strengthening your willpower, you enhance your ability to adopt habits that lead to a successful and positive lifestyle.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the Author Echoes for more content like this. Drop a comment below to let us know what you found most interesting, or if you want us to cover any books that we haven't yet. Until next time, keep pushing towards your goals.